Hey, I'm really excited to talk to Tammy Lin, Dr. Tammy Lin, Distinguished Professor in the College of Communication at the National Chengchi University. Tammy and I are former colleagues. We did our graduate degrees together. We graduated the same year. I just recognized from your CV. And so we're kind of colleagues. I left for industry and joined crypto industry, and you stayed the academic path, became a distinguished professor, publications and research. And it's awesome to see you again. We've chatted a couple of times, but it's really been quite a while since we've had a chance to catch up. So awesome to see you, Tammy.
Yeah, I'm really happy to see you, Andy. It's been a while. I think it's been a decade that we have graduated from Michigan State University. So
Yep.
time really flies and technology really evolved along the way. So there are a bunch of things that we can study, and you are in the industry. So there's so many things that you can play with. So I'm really happy to have this opportunity to talk about our collaboration or
Yeah,
our
yeah.
ideas in the industry and also in the academics. So
Awesome.
hello,
Well,
everyone.
what I'm really excited about is in the crypto space, NFTs are really big. There has been this talk, and not just crypto, but like in the broader tech world, this talk about the metaverse. And we've had conversations all year. What is the metaverse? In the sort of Web3 crypto industry, it's about owning your own assets that are digital assets and having
Mhm.
proof of ownership. But there's not a lot of understanding about the research that's gone on before the last 12 months. And in my time coming up in graduate school, I know you as well, we were among the leading scholars from the 80s, right? Like people who have been studying this for a really long time. And you've continued this research as well. And so I wanted to bring you on to give our audience, which tends to be more developer and cryptocurrency Web3 focused, a sense of how do people understand virtual reality, the metaverse, and what this is? And so, super excited to have you on. Can you talk a little bit about your research focus and how you think about these things and how you have the past number of years?
Okay, so actually my research expertise focus on digital games and virtual reality and also social media. So you can see these are all like communication technology, and they're leading technology to form how communication changes and evolve the way. So social media definitely has changed all the world in the past decade. So that's one of my area. And the other stream of my research really focus on how the interactivity, this unique characteristics in digital games, and after 2016 becomes virtual reality, and how that changes our way to communicate with others, and how we position digital games and virtual reality as a means of persuasive tools to encourage people to exercise more or to understand persuasive messages more clearly in first person perspective to
Mhm.
understand all the different messages. So you can see there are so many applications using digital games and virtual reality to promote exercise or to promote health related messages. So I'm really interested in how players, they when they use their avatar or use their characters, how the traits or different characteristics in the character, how that influences players' perceptions of themselves. So I did some research in digital games, and I published in Journal Communication and other like media psychology. And I found that when you are playing video games, your self-concept about yourself, that means the temporary concept about yourself, is influenced by the traits of the avatar that you play. For example, if you play GTA 4 or 5, Grand Theft Auto series, you know you're playing a character that's robbing other people's cars or doing some illegal things, and the character kept swearing all the time. So at that moment in my study, I used GTA 4 as my stimulus, and people who played that character, and when their mission is to, for example, to rescue his cousin, he had to kill some people along the way. He felt temporarily himself the self is more violent than those people who watch the video. So when you're playing it, more interactive, and you feel like you're more violent. But if you are in the mission Sim in the GTA 4, the same character. And when you are playing bowling, it's also competition with a girl in the game. And you follow all the traffic rules. You stop the car before the red light. You didn't rob anyone's car. When you play the game and you feel like yourself is more peaceful than those who watch the game. So it told us that, oh, it's really interesting. The interactivity, the characteristic in digital games really influence how you perceive yourself. So that's in digital games. So after 2016, virtual reality has been commercialized. Just so everyone, if you have money, you can just
Whoa.
buy it and then
Hold on.
play with it.
I want to stop for a minute and just give a little context. This is really cool,
Yeah.
actually, and these effects are interesting for metaverse creators as people are building metaverse systems, because there's this assumption that a more immersive, a more realistic virtual environment is really what drives player engagement. And while those certainly are engaging experiences, that's not all of it. It's what you can do, right? It's what you are actually doing. And it has these sort of ripple effects when you think about NFTs. When I'm going to think about NFTs is what you do with NFTs is you own them. You can own them, and having this ownership and proof of ownership really changes the dynamic of the player with the digital asset, whatever metaverse world it happens to be. And we're just now exploring what are those effects and what would those be. So that's kind of the context. Like when I hear you talking about this, it's about what are the effects on players' experiences and perceptions as they interact with these metaverse type experiences, gaming, virtual reality, or whatever it may be. So virtual reality, you were just starting to tell us about 2016 and kind of how it becomes consumer and retail available.
So after that, everyone can get that if you have the money, right? So it's commercialization. So I my lab and we just got the very first HTC 5 first generation, the first one to get it in the world in Taiwan. So our lab is the lucky one. So I had this idea. Oh, if I got the very first one from the world, as a scientist, I really want to do something really cool with it. And so I want to publish something really cool about virtual reality and get to know what it can do and how it influences audiences who participate in the virtual experience. So I did some different types of research. In the beginning, I did research of horror games, virtual reality horror games, because it was so popular at that time. So I did some theory and it was really interesting, but not the focus today. But today I want to talk about protease effect. Protease effect was, theorized by E and Bailenson from Stanford University around 2008 and 2009. And it talked about when you are in virtual reality, you actually own, like embody the virtual body. So it's totally different from other type of media. For example, in the digital games, in the digital game, you play a character. So you look at the character at your screen. So there's a distance from your actual self and the character. And we know there's a first person perspective in video games, but you are still looking at his hands in the screen, but not, and you can see your actual hands in the real world. So there's still like a gap between your body and the character's body. But in virtual reality, if you have the experiences to put on the head-mounted devices, which is HMD devices, you have these goggles and you put it on. If you have a virtual body, if you look at it, you look down, you feel like that virtual body is your own body, because you can, move your hands and move your body and just move along like that. So that thing is really interesting because of this embodiment. Protease effect indicates that if the characteristics in this virtual body will influence your behavior and your attitudes. So from my perspective as a scholar, I wanted to go deeper with the theory, because that theory only talks about, it would change your self-perception and self-alteration, and it didn't really specify why it changes your attitude and behavior. So in my two of the studies that I'm going to talk about today, my argument is that because the embodiment, it changes your temporarily self-concept. So you temporarily perceive yourself differently, and it align with this virtual body. And because of that, that would change your virtual behavior. So I put it in the exercise context because a lot of people has done for protease effect before. For example, Ian Bailenson, they originally tested this idea in the social context. For example, if you put yourself into a really beautiful and attractive faces versus not that attractive faces, and see how people distance themselves and how much they disclose their personal information. And in that study, the results is interesting. They find that people who are assigned into the attractive faces, virtual faces, they are more likely to disclose more information, which indicates they're more confident about their appearances.
So if I'm given a more attractive face, I look in the
you are
mirror
already
in virtual reality, and but even more, right, just a beautiful, and then I'm more confident. It's like, oh well, I know I'm a beautiful person in this world, and I have this other levels of disclosure. Cool. It's such a cool effect.
Yeah, so that's from their study. So you might just disclose your identity or something. I'm just kidding. So in the second experiment, they assign you into a taller or a shorter avatar. So you're taller or shorter in the virtual reality, and your mission is to do a combating. So it's a negotiation process. So anyway, the result is more like if you're taller, you're more willing to reject unfair negotiation. So you're more willing to say no to unfair split of the money, something like that. So their argument is that, if you're assigned into a really like a greater avatar, your behavior would become greater or better. So a lot of people did in the different things. For example, assign white people, like Caucasian people, into African American avatars and see if that would decrease their their bias into different racial representation. So and it works. So my and nobody really applied that into the exercise context. So I did this. I had this idea. So I think elder people, they want to exercise, but there are so many limitations in the real world. For example, the weather is not good, and the pandemics, or sometimes they're just not strong enough to do really intense exercise. And exercise is sometimes you need encouragement. You need people to accompany so that you're more willing to exercise. So I'm thinking about how maybe I can invite them into the lab. And if I give them a young avatar, for example, like if I invite those who are 60 and 60 years older people come to my lab and they put on the goggle and they're doing some exercise. And those exercises are simple exercise, and they are assigned into either a young avatar, like 20 years old, or like an elder people, normal, like 60s body, and see how that influence their attitudes and their behavior while they're using their virtual avatar to exercise. So this is the first study that I come up with. So you can find it. It's already published in Frontiers in Psychology. So
we'll have the links available for people.
Yeah, so I had this crazy idea, and I initially I really did not want to pursue this idea because inviting elder people to come to the lab is really hard. And where do you recruit these elder people? And it's an experiment. It's a 2x2 experiment. So virtual body type, young versus old, and female and male. Because in the literature, male elder and female elder, or female and male, they respond differently toward this kind of body shape. So I had this 2x2, so I at least need 120 people to participate. And I'm really lucky because I had this really cool lab members. They're all my students from my master's program. They said, Professor, and they said, Tammy, we can definitely do this. Just count on us. We can recruit enough people. So they're so smart. They contacted the local health agency, like the government agency, and they are in contact with so many different elders in the neighborhood. So they contacted so many leaders, and they are able to recruit those people, and they even donated different appliances, so they are more willing to participate in the experiment. So I will provide materials to Andy, and we can briefly see our lab setting is here like this. So you'll see the graph later. So in the lab, you can see it's more like a living room. So it's very comfortable. So they come here, there's a couch and there's a television. It's just the setting is just like a living room. So it's really great. Yeah. And they put on the device, and we show they're in this virtual gym. So in the virtual space, they're in the virtual gym, and they look at this television in the gym. So the television will show there's a video telling them what actions you can do, what kind of exercise you can do. So they are just following the exercise and the movement from the screen in the virtual gym. And so before the experiment starts, they look at the mirror. So in the gym, there's a mirror in front of them. So just like the regular gym, you're in the aerobics class, you always dance in front of the mirror, and there's a instead of a coach, there's a television, and you look at the videos and you follow along with all the movements. So before the experiment, we asked the participant to look at the screen and then look down to see their body. So to make sure that they notice that their virtual body is whether young or either young or like a 60 years old. So after that, they follow the videos to do all the different physical movements, and along the way we strap the accelerometer. That's a device to measure their physical movements. So you can measure the X, Y, Z, and come up with this factor, and so it's a different dimensions of the movements, and it determines how many actions that you did, or how many physical movements that you have. So for the outcomes, first, we are very interested what their perceived exertion is. So perceived exertion, it means that how much that you devote your effort during the exercise, and how much that you feel like you devote all of the energy into it. So
how hard do you think you worked?
Thank you, Andy. So it's a Borg rating. So using the well-established scale. So we asked them, how hard do you think you devote yourself into the exercise? So I believe it's like 5 to 17 or something. So the result is very interesting. So there's a main effect of the avatar age on the perceived exertion. It means that regardless of the sex, regardless you're female or male participants, as long as you're having these young virtual avatars, you perceive yourself devoted more into the exercise. So practically speaking, we can design a really cool virtual reality exercise session, and you are able to pick your own avatar. For example, for elders, they can pick a young avatars, and they will feel like, oh, I feel like I want to devote harder. And I think it's really beneficial, and it's great for elder people. It's a way to motivate them to really engage in this virtual exercise. So this is one of the highlights from this study. And the other one, we are also interested in their self-efficacy, because self-efficacy is such a key factor motivating them for future exercise. So we also ask them, hey, what do you think that you are confident that you will, engage this similar or the same exercise in the future, and using this, virtual body or something. And there's interaction effects between sex and also the avatar type, a young or old. So simply put, the result shows that for female participants, using the young avatar will will lead them to have a greater self-efficacy. They're more confident. They're more confident that they are going to do the same exercise than those who use the older avatars among the female participants. But for male participants, there's no effects. So we know there's a sex difference, and also for the actual behavior, we want to know, okay, now you feel like you are more, you work harder and you are more confident for female. And we also want to know during the 3 to 5 minutes exercise, did you really actually put more, did you have more physical movement? Because that's a very important indicator for exercise, right? You want to move more. So there's
especially
also
if you feel like you're working hard, but you're not working hard, that's pretty important to know, right?
Yes. So you should feel like you work hard and you also work harder, represented by the actual behavior. So there's also an interaction effects, and it's similar than the self-efficacy. So among female participants, using the young avatar, they would demonstrate greater physical movements than when they're using embodied the older avatars. And for male participants, there is a slight difference, but not very significant. So also very optimistic and works really great for female participants. And also remember, I argue that self-concept is the key, right? So I also measure the self-concept using the explicit and implicit self-concept. But it's more academic. You can find it in the paper. But simply put, implicit self-concept is using the IAT, which is implicit association test. So it's a task that you have to categorize yourself and other people into like young or old, like toward your self-concept. So in this study, I hypothesized that if you're embodying a young avatar, you should temporarily perceive yourself as younger, like temporarily younger than older. I don't know if it works because it's so short, right? And it's in virtual reality, and you can still feel your body is old. So I'm not too sure if just wearing a goggle will change your. Yeah, no, you're still young, but it's really hard to just use VR to do that. But of implicit association test, it was conducted after you put out your goggle. It was, conducted after the experiment. So they can still see their own body when they're doing the. So we included another one is explicit association, explicit self-concept. We directly asked them during the exercise when you are wearing the goggle, what is your self-concept toward your own body? Is it younger or older? And we found that female participants, female elder, they perceive their self-concept as younger than when they're embody the younger one than the old one. And the male participant, no difference at all. So we see the 4 different outcomes. We can see it's really interesting. Embodying this young avatar can change your perceived exertion, and for females it works really great for their self-efficacy, their actual body movement, and also their self-concept. And for male participants, there's just no difference. But at least for everyone, if you embody this younger avatar, you work harder. So I think it's a really interesting result from the study, and I'm really encouraged by this result because I see a lot of applications in Metaverse right now. For example, I love Metaverse, so I exercise a lot in Metaverse. For example, I use FitXR to exercise routinely during the pandemics, and I just wish that I had this virtual body that I can manipulate with. So to encourage myself more, right? So I really think I do see an imminent or a practical application that we can use in this. So I had another idea because
hold on, Tammy. I want to pull back and give some context. There's something I see. So my big concern is that it's all in virtual reality. Does it have to be? What does the Proteus effect research say about? Does it have to be in VR? because to me, a metaverse experience is not necessarily virtual reality. I would guess that you would find similar results, similar Proteus effect results with Snapchat filters, with Zoom filters, with things that soften the lighting, which I always use. That's how I look so young. That's my secret. Uh, uh, because we're witnessing ourselves and we're seeing ourselves in these lights. And so it is not necessarily a virtual reality effect, but maybe there's these other dynamics of embodiment that's not just like hyper engaged sensory, trickery, but these other sort of elements. Do you have like thoughts about that? Because when we look at the metaverse, at least from the crypto perspective, a lot of these are not deep, engaging virtual reality experiences yet. But at the same time, we see these deep, unbelievably incredible communities. People are hyper engaged in these ways. And so I can't help but see the parallels here in some of these things. What do you think about that?
That's a great question. Actually, the academics have already answered this because a lot of researchers, they studied Proteus effect in non-VR context. So they did this exercise or other contexts or social interactions in non-VR context, usually in digital games, because there's an environment for you to have an avatar. So just simply looking at screen, for example, like you have an avatar and change your body shape, like overweight or really thin, and it would change your motivation to exercise as well. So not necessarily in VR, but just in VR, I believe that Proteus is stronger if you want to compare VR versus like a non-VR environment. But Proteus effect indeed exists in other channels. And back to your context, I do think right now a lot of metaverse in sandbox or in different, multiverse or digital world or virtual world or Roblox, they massively use avatars, like just a facial like avatar or a 3D representation of avatar like from NVIDIA. So those can also have the Proteus effect, I do believe. So there's a bunch that we can research right there.
There's a really interesting thing you brought up about VR being stronger. Here's what I suspect. This is just my speculation. I don't have data, but this is what my next study would be is I bet it's stronger faster, but I'll bet if I play a video game for years, I know how to play that game so well, it doesn't matter if it's VR or not. My hands are that character, like what I can do. In the old days, I don't game anymore, but Modern Warfare 2, like I was a master at that game, and now I've aged out. But it was to that effect where it was an embodiment, even though it wasn't a virtual reality. Of course, that takes a much longer time. In experimental induction, you want to just like, let's go, let's get you engaged, and so you can get that fast. That's what I would suspect is that strength is faster. But then I would also wonder, like on the longer term, when it comes to months and years of playing, you might see a flip effect.
Definitely, because when I was doing that kind of research in digital games, we call it character identification. So character identification is the mechanism to talk about, hey, you just because it's not just because it's not VR, but it's still in the digital games, and you embody yourself through this, your both your hands or your mouth or different things, and you deeply engage yourself with the character. So
excuse me,
you are bless you but you are the character. So character identification is the key mechanism to explain why you can that sort of Proteus effect from the character to you. And actually it's not totally based on the character. It's the mixture of yourself and the character. That's the true self in the digital game. So that's from the literature you can find out. And it's very interesting.
That's a really important takeaway for a lot of this audience is if you're a game designer, right? If you're a metaverse designer right now, a blend of the player and the avatar and what they're doing together, that affects outcomes. And many of those outcomes can be engagement, which results in more playing, right? People have more fun, they have more engagement, they have more meaningful experiences, all of those sorts of things. So this directly relates to builders in a lot of ways. Fantastic to touch on these. Tammy, you were about to talk about another study. So like, I want to hear about these too, because this is cool stuff. What did you build on after this?
Well, the other one is similar, but a different population because originally it was the same study that I want to do elder people and also college students,
Hmm.
20 years old versus 60 years old, and to see if they swap body or consistent bodies. But that didn't work because, the exercise they need are different.
Hmm.
Elder people, their
Interesting.
exercise just different from the 20 years old. I do not want to force them into the one study. So I will still want to test what the Pro Tools effect in virtual reality, what that could be in for young people. So I designed another study for college students, and for them, I designed the exercise for six pack, like the core muscle exercise. So in Taiwan right now, all the advertisements they are persuading people, no matter you're male or female, having a six pack is really cool. It's trendy. It's not sexy, but it's just really cool. It means that you're fit and you have a really cool lifestyle and you have a fit body. So it's become a trend that having a six pack is really great, and it indicates that you manage your body really well. So I think, okay, so I want to see, if I give the young people have, if I give you a virtual body with a six pack on it, versus there's no six pack, just
Hmm.
normal body. And I originally also designed another condition, which is control group. You have no body, like you have
Hmm.
no virtual body. But in the published paper, we did not include that one because it totally is, yeah, it doesn't work
It's a
at
very
all.
different,
So
very
we,
different experience.
yeah, again, because you should still have a body. So yeah, so that control group, we just experiment with that. Yeah, so we focus on if you have a normal body versus a six pack body, and how that influence your core exercise, core muscle exercise. And because core muscle exercise is also encouraged in our education right now, so I think there's a really cool excuse for us to promote this. So
Cool.
it's a similar design, so 2x2 as well. And it's a female versus male, because in the literature also says that female and male people, they respond to ideal body shape differently.
Hmm.
So they argue that female always respond well to the ideal body shape. But I don't know if six pack is ideal for female people because we don't need six pack. We can be ideal without six pack. So I did not use ideal body shape in my study. I just said if it's a six pack. What do you think? Okay, and the other two is muscular shaped body, which is a six pack, and the normal shaped body. And I will provide a photo and the visual presentation for
We'll
you to
put it
see
up on the
clearer.
edits. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. So our team, we did not hire artists. My students build the artists from scratch. So it took a long time for us because we're not trained to do that. But luckily, there are so many free tools online. We can just, make humans or something. You can just pick your avatars and adjust the body shape. So we put it off at the end. And so by two, so we invited the college students to come here, and I want to mention in the elder studies, we specifically recruit people who did not engage in vigorous exercise because Pro Tool is if you want them to exercise, if they already engage in regular or vigorous exercise, it did not. I don't
Hmm.
think it works for them. So the same here in the college students, we recruit those who did not have a six pack first, and second, they did not do a lot of like core muscle exercise. So we want to promote this kind of exercise for those who do not regularly engage this kind of exercise. So these are our criteria for recruitments. So those who do not have a six pack and do not regularly engage in the core muscle exercise come. So when they so they also put on their accelerometer measuring their physical activity. So it's very similar to the elder design.
Hmm.
So if they put on the goggle, they will enter this virtual gym as well. So it's similar to and they face a mirror so they can see their body has a six pack or not. And then there's a screen, TV screen, and our students, they recorded this video and teach them different core muscle exercise movements. So they had to do and follow along to do this kind of physical activities and movements. So we put the experiments into two phases. The first phase is you follow along the video in the screen and then you do all the things. And the second one is voluntary phase. So there's no videos and you can voluntarily do anything that you want. So there's an experimental phase and also the voluntary phase, and both are wearing the goggle. You can see whether your virtual body has a six-pack or not. So the results. Also, we want to know if their perceived exertion are different and if their self-concept and their self-efficacy, self-concept, and also their actual behavior, actual physical movements. And we also send another questionnaire the second day. So next day, we ask them, do you still want to do the exercise, core muscle exercise, and what your self-efficacy is? So simply put, the results are slightly different from the elder one, but this one is the immediate self-efficacy. There is a interaction effects. So for female people, if you are having this normal shaped body, their immediate self-efficacy is stronger than the muscular shaped body. So for female, they feel like if I don't have a six-pack, I need to do more core muscle exercise. So it's different, but it's in a good way, because if in the exercise, if I assign you a muscular shape, they feel like, oh, I'm already good. So I don't feel like I have good high self-efficacy to exercise. So it's really interesting. And for male people, there's no different at all. Their self-efficacy is just like that. Yeah, no different. So it's a very interesting interpretation and very surprising results. And for the next day, self-efficacy is the same. So if I give you a normal shaped body, the next day they feel like, yes, for a female, they feel like they need to do more of this kind of exercise. And if you already give them the six-pack muscle, they feel like, oh, it's okay, I don't need to do more of them. So it might be the other way of the pro-choice effect, I guess. And for the IAT, the self-concept, it's very interesting. So for female right now, so if you give them the six-pack body, they've perceived themselves as a more fit. So they perceive my body is really fit than those who have a normal body shape. But for male participant, it's reversed. So for male people, if you give them the six-pack, they feel like, oh, my self-concept about my body is really bad. It's significantly worse than those if you give them the normal shaped body. So I think it's really, really different and interesting. So you can see using the VR virtual body to persuade people, or if you give them the six-pack, for female, they will feel like, oh yeah, my virtual body, it influenced my self-concept. My body is really good. So they don't think they need to exercise more. So for those who are assigned normal body, they feel like, oh, I need to do more core muscle exercise. But for male participants, if you give them six-pack virtual body, they feel worse about their actual body. Their self-concept is worse, because they can feel probably there's no flex muscle there's a gap between their visual and their actual flexing their abdominal area. So I guess it's explain the reverse results. So, and the actual the vector movements, there's no like a significant effects. So it's really interesting for the six-pack. So, and this one is really surprising because very little of my hypotheses are supported, but I'm really surprised to see, oh, I thought that giving you a six pack will encourage you to do more, but actually, giving you a six pack for a female, they feel like, oh, I already have a good one, so I don't need to exercise more. And it turned out that the normal body shape is better. So it gave me an idea that maybe in the future, for six pack, this kind of like ideal or ideal body shape, you can customize and give people choices to see if they want to use six pack or normal or obese. So it really up to the audience and players, and they can play with their self-concept, play with their visuals, and see how that encourages them to do this kind of core muscle exercise.
That's my one of my go-to questions is in these experiments, people are just assigned a condition, and so there's this randomization element that to find the effects. Letting people choose what to do is a really interesting dynamic that will throw a whole bunch of error in your next study, but that's one of these cool parts, and that's a lot closer to reality when I go and choose my avatar, who I want to use in a game, or what game I even want to play. Maybe there's nobody who represents me, and so I don't want to play that game. We have seen that before, but that's a very different dynamic, because I might not choose somebody necessarily who does represent me or who I ideally wants to represent me, but I still may have some effect anyway of embodying that character in some way or in a virtual space. So that's a really interesting area. When it comes to the fewer results in the second study, I can't help but wonder about a bunch of additional added error. Young and old is a very different sort of metric than fit and non-fit, or six pack, six pack, especially if there's a big ad campaign about six packs and like it's on everybody's mind. That's kind of a different thing, and younger people tend to be more in tune with those as well. In those advertisements, I also wonder about gamers. People, like when I go into a virtual reality experience, my first question is, what's the game? How do I play this game? It may be an exercise, but I'm like, no, I'm going to figure out how to play this game. And if I look at my avatar and be like, okay, I got to get abs on it, or maybe not, who knows? But there's definitely those sort of considerations of like, there's some way, when the Wii first came out and people were playing Wii tennis, all the scholars were really excited. Everyone was really excited about exercise. And then people figured out you can just sit down and do this with the Wiimote and you can play the game. And you still play the game without having to engage. And so there's like different levels of gamesmanship in some of these experiences as well. Nevertheless, like a really interesting sort of basis to think about when you're designing experiences for players or letting them design them for themselves. What is that Goldilocks zone, right? What's just right for players? And we see that a fair amount, like in other effects, like the uncanny valley, right? If something is too creepy but too close, like it weirds me out and it pulls me out of the experience. If it's cartoony, then like, okay, I'm okay with that, because I can at least understand this is just all a game, and then I can even get more engaged than if something's closer to reality but not quite right. So there's a lot of sort of overlapping elements that could be happening there.
Yeah. So because looking back to my own Metaverse exercise experience right now in FitXR, our representation is more like a human-made robotic right now. So nobody feel like, oh, I can feel like I'm exercising with others, but it's just not me or other people. So I do see a lot of like avatar elements that we can play with in the future. So there's a big one that we can play with. It's interesting to see how that goes in that there. So I'm just happy that I had the determination to do these two studies, and because do VR studies are really time consuming and money burning. So but I'm happy that both of them pulled out and had a really interesting effects. So hopefully we can see more applications.
Awesome overview of these studies. Can you take a minute and think? We got a couple of minutes. If somebody's coming into this conversation as an engineer, what are some findings or some basic ideas from the decades of research into virtual reality and presence and this whole line of research that we kind of come from? What are some basic takeaways that you think people would be really interested to think about or understand?
Well, right now in virtual reality, people really focus on presence. So the environment, for example, you need to construct this environment. So basically we have this environment. So I feel like, oh, I'm in that world. So we have already know that. And we know that the interactions are really important. For example, I can interact with the objects. Like I can take up this thing and then play with it. I can pass the ball to another person. So these are
Sensory,
two like
interactive sort of
yeah,
presence.
very interesting. But the third one, the body part, is a virtual body part hasn't been experimented or manipulated or experienced enough right now because mostly we we do not necessarily need a virtual body to interact with others. But
Mhm.
in the future, in metaverse, we definitely need some things to represent ourselves. For example, Mark Zuckerberg has this really human-like Mark Zuckerberg avatar in his presentation in the 2021 Connect
Mhm.
conference, right? So we definitely want some avatar representation. And from these studies, we can feel, we know that regardless of the representation is you or not, or some other avatars, the traits of the avatars will definitely influence the players'
Mhm.
attitudes of themselves and also their behavior. So there is a bunch of um, research already
Mhm.
there that shows that just changing your skin color or your appearances or even put yourself into Einstein or some really famous people, it changes your perception of
Mhm.
yourself. So virtual body is definitely a big field that we can explore, and there is a potential, a lot of things that we can play with in this
That's cool.
area. So that's the main takeaway from today's
I'll
conversation.
drop a couple of my favorites, just like brief cliff notes. On top of sensory presence, embodiment, social presence is this a huge element that I think a lot of metaverse projects are actually starting to get. Is you build a community and then you bring it into sort of a virtual world, a digital environment of some kind, because that community, those interactions, that's what keeps people there. That those are real relationships that you have, even if you build them over chat, over Twitter, or whatever it is. You just move them into a virtual space, and that virtual space feels that much more real because they're real conversation. This is a real conversation you and I are having. We are
Yes.
literally across the world, nearly as far as you can be from somebody. But this is still a very genuine, real conversation. It feels real. So that's a cool one. The other one is the Reeves and Nast stuff about how people process media in general. Is our brains are not programmed to like recognize that media is fake. We interpret
Mm,
things as real by default, and it really takes something special to kind of pull us out of that. And there's a whole bunch of effects because of that weird brain, just the way our brains evolved, and it hasn't been that long since we've had, screens and
mm.
things like that. That it's just a fascinating area. Tammy, I appreciate you coming on so much and hanging out and talking about these studies, giving people kind of a snapshot into the social science side of metaverse research, because we don't hear a lot about that in the industry right now.
Mm.
What are some of the things you're kind of looking forward to in maybe your next study, or some technologies that you've seen that you're just really excited to pursue next as we wrap up here?
Yeah, it's my secret, but the direction is right now there's a really famous app called Supernatural that Meta, the Facebook, is also collaborating with. Their main takeaway is that you can exercise on top of a volcano. So it's like a natural geographic natural setting. So I'm in the next studies or next series of studies, I'm going to look at transcendence or awe, feeling of awe in the natural
Mm,
experience. If we can take advantage of that into the virtual reality, because I can never even if I'm billionaire, I can never exercise on top of a volcano. That's impossible for anyone. So in VR, you can do that, and that can create this kind of sense of awe and transcendence, and it makes people feel like I need to do some social good or just simply exercise
mm.
more. So I would like to look at that and see how that, play with the virtual body and also the natural setting, and to see how transcendence and your minimal
Mhm.
self concept, how that interact with this and apply to the exercise effects.
Yeah,
So
my whole
I'm
life I've seen
excited about
beautiful.
that.
That's awesome. My whole life I've seen beautiful scenery, video games, movies, all this. Only like this past week have I actually been taken aback watching a show and been like, "This is the most gorgeous scenery." I don't even care what the show's about. I just want to go there. It's only been now I've
Yeah.
seen the most stunning thing. So finally, maybe I'm just getting old, and so it's catching up to me, or maybe it's just the most
Yeah.
beautiful scenery. It's the Wheel of Time. I'm gonna put a plug. I don't know them. I don't care, but like, oh my gosh, it's the most beautiful shot in the world. Tammy, thank you so much for taking the time and coming to talk to us. We will make sure to include links to your studies down below and out to your profile wherever it may be. I appreciate you so much for coming on. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Andy. I'm really had a great time today to talk to you and have this great opportunity to talk to the audiences. And hopefully we can do more of this in the future and more studies coming our way. Thank
Awesome.
you.